Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the GUTSY podcast. A massive thank you as always to everybody who's tuning in. The feedback has been brilliant. We're really thankful for that and really glad that you guys are getting something out of it, to say the least. Thanks to the wonderful guests that we've got on. And today is absolutely no exception. We have a guest we've been trying to get on for ages. She's got a very busy schedule, this one. We have the wonderful Jen Rose. Now, Jen, living in UC since the age of 10, a mum of 3, one of which has Crohn's, volunteer, patient advocate, author, illustrator. The list is pretty much endless. You've got a lot of talents, Jen.
That's very kind of you.
I know you're a wee bit embarrassed with me saying that. But yeah, it's great to have you here today. It's a pleasure that you've taken the time to come up to the studio from Englandshire.
Thank you. No, it's wonderful to be here. It felt, for a time, it felt like it was never going to happen, but it's a bit of a journey, but we've made it and it's so good to be here. Yeah,
but you've had a couple of days and you've brought the weather.
We have, indeed.
You've brought the weather, which is wonderful. It was our first glimpse of, we're going to say, that's Scottish summer anyway. So
okay, I was going to say spring. Spring is more realistic.
Oh, I'm sure we've got a phrase in Scotland, taps off, and there's been definitely reports of taps off. So that's summer in Scotland, definitely. Uh-huh. So anyway, welcome. It's great to have you here. I know we've been talking about getting you on GUTSY podcast for quite some time.
Thank you.
So it's wonderful to have you. I think we should start at the start. Mm-hmm. A little bit about your story. And then we can, there's so much to talk about.
There is indeed. It's been going on for quite some time. Quite some time now. Quite some time.
So let's go back to the start, Jen, and your journey. You know, you're very young.
I was indeed, yes. I can't really remember a great deal of kind of before I was diagnosed, or even really the sort of diagnosis journey. I remember feeling not very well. And I remember it kind of beginning to impact my life and not understanding why, but then not really being brave enough to say anything. And so kind of tolerating these changes for quite some time until it was noticed by my family, I guess. Yeah. I think we're talking like 36 years ago now. So, and I was very much, back then it was very much not a topic. Going to the toilet, bowels and poo, they weren't really a topic that was part of polite conversation. So you kind of, you didn't bring it up particularly.
No, it's pretty taboo. It's still awkward now.
It's still that way.
It's still awkward now for a lot of people, and you can understand that. But I think the world that we lived in then, kind of 35 or so years ago, is very different. So going through those changes and those challenges that you've got, and do you remember how long that lasted before your family noticed, and then you maybe had to do something about that?
Not really, to be honest. I can't really remember. I think the most noticeable and the most memorable bit was having to go, or being stuck in the toilet before going to school in the morning. Right. And so obviously that's when you're in a house with 5 other people, 3 of them children needing to go to school, and it's pretty inconvenient having the toilet being sort of engaged for long periods of time. And then I remember quite often getting to the stage where we would need to leave for school and mum would be saying, Jen, come on, we need to go out of the toilet. Come on out of the toilet. And one of the symptoms I've always had, and still now, and have found really difficult, is the feeling of, it's kind of like, it's tenesmus basically. So it's that feeling of not being able to, or not finish going to the toilet. Yeah. It feels like you always need to go, even if you've been and there's absolutely nothing there. And as a young kid, sort of trying to understand that and trying to go, okay, I feel like I still need to go to the toilet, but I'm not going to, so I need to now get off the toilet and go about my day. It's so difficult.
I can imagine that, to be honest with you, because it's always that, almost like an anticipation or a fear or everything mixed into one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But equally, the fear of being late for school or of upsetting my parents was enough to kind of overcome that. So I don't think I was ever, I can't recall ever having time off school, even when it was incredibly difficult. The sort of wanting to comply, the wanting to not talk about something that's embarrassing was enough to get me out of the toilet in the mornings.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of people watching that you know, whether they're parents or they're a bit younger, that can actually relate to that. So how, if you don't mind me asking, so when you're at school then, I know it's maybe a bit hazy to remember it, and if you constantly feel as if you need to go, how did you navigate that in school then? Because that sounds even harder than getting out the house in the morning.
Yeah. It was being a young person in school, particularly once I started high school, and trying to cope with these symptoms. And then obviously there are times where you do need to go to the toilet. There are times when you don't make it to the toilet. Yeah. It was so difficult. And because I didn't want anybody to know about it, I was so ashamed and so embarrassed, and I didn't understand what was going on really. I'd had some sort of fairly traumatic kind of medical appointments where I didn't really understand what was going on. I was having some pretty unpleasant tests being done to me. There was no paediatric services back then, so it was very much having the same doctors and the same procedures and the same tests as adult patients were. I had some pretty horrendous blood tests that gave me an absolute phobia of blood tests for quite some time. Yeah. So anything around IBD or my disease or how I was feeling was just so much trauma that I kind of tried to pretend it wasn't there. I tried to ignore it, which is really difficult when you're having these awful symptoms. School was hard. I didn't want anyone, and none of my friends knew. I didn't want any of the teachers to know. I didn't tell my parents what was going on at school and how difficult it was. Trying to make it through lessons when you desperately need the toilet, and you know that it could well be that even when you go to the toilet, you won't make it because it's a little bit of a journey. It was quite hard to focus on lessons sometimes. Yeah. I remember being too scared to tell the teacher I needed to go to the toilet quite often, and would hold everything in until break time if I could, or often I would have accidents, and I would then have to go and deal with that after lesson. So yeah, it was difficult.
Mind-blowingly difficult, because do you know what? School's hard enough. Yeah. You know, at the age you're going through that. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's the people that we deal with the foundation and some of the guests that we've had on GUTSY podcast as well. There's not a middle ground with how they deal with it. Mm. We hear people like yourself who will not tell anybody. Yes. Will shut it away. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, brings its own challenges. Mm-hmm. And then we've got the other side of the flip side of the coin, where they're very open. Yeah. Saying that, well, this is me.
Oh my goodness,
this is,
yeah.
This is what I've got. And if, I think how we judge things, and not judging, how we deal with things rather, is very, what's the word? I mean, we had young Brandon Duffy on, who he basically at one point he had a stoma, and I think he had his stoma for a year or 2 years. And this was like going into PE and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was bizarrely an incredible talent that to hide that. Yeah. So for you to bottle all this up and to hide the effects on it, that must have been so difficult for you mentally.
Absolutely.
As well
as
physically.
Had a huge impact on my mental health. I used to live in my head most of the time. Yeah. And because I didn't know anybody else that was going through what I was going through, I didn't understand that it wasn't something that I'd done. It wasn't a failing on my part. I just developed this, I had crushingly low self-esteem. I and I didn't like myself very much. I had I had this internal narrative where if I needed to go to the toilet and I was sat in the toilets at school, which, as you can imagine, wasn't a very private place. And so trying to hold in noises and smells until there was nobody else in the toilet. But at break time, that's not often something that happens. And so I would actually be saying in my head, and it makes me so sad to think about it now, but I would be saying in my head to myself, "You're disgusting. This is so disgusting. You are disgusting."
My God.
And that was years of feeling that way, actually. And it was I agree, it was a talent. None of my friends had any idea that I had any issue that I was dealing with. Often I would get to the end of the day at school and I'd been holding my tummy in, or holding in gas and poo for the entire day. And well, you know what it's like when you've got trapped wind and you get it's painful and uncomfortable. But to do that all day, every day, I would get home and by the time I was walking home, it was about half a mile walk home. I couldn't stand up straight because I was so uncomfortable. So yeah, and that was every day. It was pretty tough. It was pretty tough.
That is, if I'm honest with you, pretty harrowing to listen to. Not only that those challenges and blocking it up, but the narrative that you were telling yourself about yourself, is really quite hard to listen to, because I couldn't honestly imagine what you would be going through. Now, looking back, what would be your advice to your younger self now?
Oh yeah. It's really difficult because I think my advice would need to go to my parents rather than to me.
Right.
I think all I needed as a young person was to understand that I wasn't alone, that it wasn't just me having to cope with this, that I hadn't done something wrong. I wasn't broken as a person just because something wasn't working quite right inside my digestive system. And that it was okay to ask for help. And and that should have come not just from my parents, that should have come from the doctors as well. But instead, doctors would talk kind of over my head in terms that I didn't understand to my parents. And the difficulty was that after a short period of time, because I was so frightened of blood tests, I hated going on steroids because of the effect that they had on the way I looked. And so my friends would be like, "What's happened to your face?" And of course, I then would make up excuses and try to figure out a way that I didn't have to explain that I had something wrong with my gut. So
sorry, what would you say?
Oh gosh, I can't remember.
Would you explain that?
I don't know. I can't remember. I would make excuses, or I would just say, "Oh, there's nothing. It always looks like this. Nothing's changed." And just desperately try and change the subject and sort of move the focus off myself, which again became a common thing. But because of all these fears that I had, I would go into appointments with the doctor or with the hospital, and I would say, "I'm fine. Everything's fine. No, I'm fine. I mean, yeah, occasionally I get tummy ache and occasionally I do need to go to the toilet a bit more, but no, I definitely don't need to go on steroids. I'm fine." Which wasn't the case, but I just was trying to avoid adding anything else on top of what I was already dealing with. I think I couldn't quite see that had I have just been honest and said, "Yes, I need this help," it would have down the line made things a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Without a doubt. But at the time you're trying to conform to what normal is, and and it's you're constantly comparing yourself to your friends and your peer group.
Yep.
And you're actually you're not doing yourself any favours, shall we say.
No.
But it's not what you're saying is not unique in many respects, because there's so many kids that go through that are fine, and they rebel against taking their medication, and down the line that's absolutely not a good idea, because they're trying to conform, they're trying to have this whatever whatever normal is.
Yeah, and it's hard enough being a teenager. It's hard enough trying to fit in and be normal when you're fairly healthy and well. But to add that on top of that, it's just it's kind of an impossible situation. And I also had the benefit of, it's definitely not a benefit. I had a conversation with a doctor once when I was first diagnosed, and I remember him sort of saying to my mum and myself, oh, well, okay, so we've had a look and this is how it is. And yes, you have moderate UC and it affects this much of your gut. So you're really, it's moderate tailing off into mild. So actually you're quite fortunate. And I think to say that to an adult or to say that to someone who has a bit more self-esteem or understands what's going on, that's okay. But to hear that as a child when you're struggling with the symptoms that you are, to be told, well, you're actually quite fortunate. That was another thing that stopped me feeling like I could complain. I felt like I couldn't make a fuss, essentially, because I was fortunate.
I think that's a really, really tough thing to listen to, because our hearers, like, if I can try and attempt to put myself in your shoes, because you're going through the hardest time of your life, and you're hiding your symptoms, which is a massive task in itself, and hardly being able to walk when you're coming home from school and things like that. And then somebody says, but you're not so bad. So then, therefore, would I be right in saying that, you must have felt loads of guilt for feeling bad? Yeah. Oh, my life has been kind of a big sort of guilt. I think guilt, shame, and embarrassment have been like a huge. They've been the driving kind of emotions in my life a lot of the time, actually. And it doesn't just stop when you become an older teenager or an adult. It kind of, I feel like that experience shaped my personality. It shaped the person that I became because I spent so long trying to hide things and trying not to be myself, I suppose, and trying not to show how I was feeling, that became the norm. So making myself small, not taking risks, not putting myself forward in any sense, kind of became my personality, and still is to an extent. I still have to battle to be brave, to do things that I have found difficult in the past, and I still have to have I have lots of doubt, lots of self-doubt, lots of challenges around self-worth and that kind of thing. It doesn't just go away. No, I bet you, because you're excuse me, it's kind of that journey has been instilled in you from a young age, and I think sometimes we do hear advice or conversations with medical professionals or parents or whatever the case is, and that doctor saying to you, but you're quite lucky. I mean, that's just a passing comment to him, because of course there'll be people that he sees that from day to day that are in worse situations.
Absolutely.
But your situation is your situation. And it sounds absolutely harrowing. And that's almost that flippant statement. I would imagine that he would never have dreamt what the level of the impact would be. Oh
no. And I think, again, if that had been said to an adult patient or to a child patient that had confidence and wasn't struggling the way I was, it wouldn't have had any impact, really. It would have just been, well, you're right. I could be in hospital. I could be having parts of my colon removed or my whole colon removed. But in that moment, I didn't feel very fortunate. But I was being told by a doctor and by an adult who, you believe what they say, that I was. But the thing is that I think is really, really important to talk about is that the people out there that, I don't want to put these into a category because it's unfair, but shall we say a milder experience, not as severe. There's loads of people that are watching this, that are living with inflammatory bowel disease, that have got that guilt
for feeling bad, for maybe voicing that they're not so good, because they appreciate that there's people much worse off than them. But that's their reality, and that reality, as you're quite rightly describing, in your younger years, is still not great. And I think it's important that voice is heard as well, and they shouldn't feel guilty about it at all.
No, indeed. I think it's really interesting, because I think if you look at social media, if you look at sort of in the press, the kind of examples that you see of people who have inflammatory bowel disease tend to be the more people who have more serious disease, the people that have more hospital trips and surgeries, and because that's kind of, as a society, that's what we're interested in, isn't it? We want to hear we almost like seek the horror stories, I suppose, the scary or the more serious stuff. And, and rightly so that those people should be sharing their stories. But it's not the most balanced. You don't then get the most balanced view of what it is to have IBD. So if you're then someone who's got more mild disease, or who's coping with some pretty tough symptoms, but you're not having to go into hospital, you're not having to have surgery, it's not surprising that some people feel, well, I can't make a fuss. No one's going to be interested in hearing what's going on for me. And that's kind of where I sat. I just felt, and still today, I still have the battle of talking about my disease and my symptoms and so on, because often one of the first questions people ask, have you had to have surgery? And it's like, then I feel guilty for saying no, which is ridiculous, but
I know.
It's a thing.
But you're right. I think society does look for the extreme, because the extreme sells, doesn't it? No matter what way you look at it.
Yeah.
But if people understood or had any sort of appreciation of what that day in the life was, then they would be. I think it would be really quite an eye opener.
Oh my goodness!
But it's impossible for them to understand it, because they're not walking in those shoes.
No. I think when you look at symptoms. So again, like I say, I've never had to go to have surgery. I've never been on a biologic medicine. However, I flare several times a year. Properly flare.
Yeah.
I'm always grumbling. My IBD nurse says you're a grumbler. You're always like on the verge of a flare, not quite in a flare, but kind of having some symptoms, but not enough to. Well, I'm so used to living with them and coping with them. I don't do anything about it a lot of the time.
You've got the IBD equivalent of the hokey cokey.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But when I am flaring, if you look at the symptoms or what I'm dealing with in the middle of a flare, going to the toilet maybe 30 times a day, if not more, quite a lot of blood being lost, and like quite a lot of discomfort, and struggling with all sorts of it's so impactful on your life. And because I've been dealing with it since I can remember, I'm used to it and I manage it. But then if you were to give those symptoms to someone that had never dealt with it before, I can quite imagine they would be taking themselves off to hospital, or they would be spending their day in bed. So I have to remind myself that whilst I cope well with my symptoms when I'm flaring and grumbling and whatever else, that doesn't necessarily mean, just because my label is moderate or mild to moderate IBD, that doesn't mean that that doesn't necessarily correlate with the impact it has on my life. No.
And I think that's one of the challenges with the world in general, or even in the IBD world, is understanding what someone's going through. Because the impact that those symptoms have in your life is pretty extreme sometimes, and how you deal with it. There was a thing on social media a wee while ago that and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but you'll get the gist of it. And it was from a young girl who was living with IBD and was saying, because I'm sure she had Crohn's disease, because I live with my Crohn's and what I'm feeling on a day-to-day basis, I'm expected just to get on with it. Whereas if someone was to live a day in my shoes, they would be taking the day off work, they would be not, or the week off or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm expected to get on with it. And it was really quite, was very basic, but it was really insightful at the same time. And I think the way that she put it, you know, I've seen loads of comments on it, and the way that she put it, you know, kind of made it a little bit more insightful for people to can understand. Because it's a tough one, because you know, knowing a little bit about your journey, from having met you a few years ago, you know, you're living with a lot.
See, even when you say that, I want to jump in and say, no, I'm not. It's fine. I've been doing it. It's fine. It's my normal. But actually, when you step away from it, occasionally I try to go, okay, I'm going to step away from me age 10 or 12 or whatever age. And if that was my child, if that was one of my children, and I knew what they were going through, I'd be horrified.
Yeah.
But because it's me and I've dealt with it, I don't give myself that kind of credit. So I have to try and do that sometimes.
And I think it's important to take that step back. And naturally, that's quite alien to you. But it's important because what you know, sometimes you just need to celebrate getting up in the morning, you know, and getting on with it. And which you do, but it's, you know, it's okay to celebrate the little things. And I think a lot of our community don't do that. They're pretty tough on themselves, to say the least.
Most definitely.
And I think I think first and foremost, for anybody that's watching the show, and a very, very common thread that comes through pretty much every conversation, if we've got somebody on who's living with inflammatory bowel disease, is that they talk about it, because the benefits are massive.
Yeah.
And that's either people that have just naturally done that, and you know, and they're getting the reward of that, or people that maybe like yourself who didn't speak about it. You know, you're pretty open about it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
They just say, like, you know, it doesn't matter who it is or what it is. Find, you know, but a common phrase that comes through is find your tribe. Find your tribe.
Yeah.
I think you've done that now.
Certainly done that now. And I do say, I mean, when you were talking about like celebrating the positives, I think what I try to remember that I wouldn't be the person I am now, doing what I'm doing now, if it wasn't for the experiences I've been through. I certainly wouldn't be able to relate to support and understand what the young people I work with, and certainly young people in my life who are going through similar situations, what they're going through, and to pick that positive, it's made me able to do that. Yeah. Sorry, I've lost track what your question was. No. So almost as if those the challenging experience that you've had and still have in many respects, almost as that silver lining that you can help more people because of what you've been through. So I think that's a positive way of putting it, to be honest with you. Now, can I jumping on a little bit? We mentioned earlier on you're as we would say in Scotland, a wee maw. Indeed that.
Of 3. They're not really kids anymore, but are they?
They're really not kids anymore. They're huge, but yeah. Yeah.
So how old are the kids?
So now I have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they don't need me that much anymore, which I'm still not quite ready for.
No, you know.
No. They're still my babies. They just don't like to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and they always will be.
They'll come back to me. They'll want to be my babies. They want me to look after them again one day.
And all still at home?
No, only one is living at home now.
How are you feeling about that? Is that a bit different?
If you want me not to cry, we'll not talk about that. No, it's fine. It's lovely to see them moving on and doing their thing. But I think particularly with my middle son, who's the one who's needed more looking after.
Yeah.
I still have that desire to look after him, and it's quite hard to do that from a distance.
Yeah. So we know that we know that he's got Crohn's.
He has Crohn's disease, yeah.
When was he diagnosed?
So he was diagnosed age 10 as well, same as me. after quite a few months of not really being well.
Did you recognise it?
It took a while, which seems utterly insane. Of anybody, I would be the best placed to be able to spot these things. But actually, his initial symptoms were quite different to anything I'd had. And I can't really remember what I was like on the lead up to diagnosis. So he was always quite a slim child, but he was kind of growing upwards a little bit, but not growing outwards. So he was getting thinner and thinner. And I think he also started, he's always had some kind of like slightly odd habits, but he started sitting down all the time. So whenever we were out and about, he would walk, but the minute we stopped, wherever we were, whatever we were doing, whatever the weather, he would sit down on the floor. And I just thought, this is a really strange habit, strange child. But it was fine. It wasn't inconvenient. The only times I would be a bit confused was if it was chucking down with rain and we were on the playground and he'd just sit down in a puddle. He would never be able to explain why. He just did. So. And that happened for quite a few months as well. Did
you just say he sat down in the puddle?
He sat down he would sit down in puddles. Like he would just sit down wherever we were, in the middle of shops, anywhere. So eventually I kind of was at the stage where I was thinking, has he got pains in his legs? Is he just, what's going on? Because he would never like add anything to it. When I said, are you okay? Yeah, he'd just get up and get going. And it wasn't until a few months later he said to me, I've got a bubbly tummy. And I was like, oh, okay. And kind of that would become his thing. He'd say, oh, I've got a bubbly tummy. And I'd say, oh, have you got tummy ache? Does it hurt? It's just bubbly. And it was kind of, it didn't take very long for me to then start going, oh, okay. And then he started going to the toilet more regularly. And it was like, oh my goodness me, okay, I'm recognising these symptoms. Yep. So I went straight to my doctor. And my doctor had dealt with my sort of journey with IBD for several years by then. And I said, you're probably just going to tell me to go away, but I've got this horrible feeling that Max might be, might have IBD. And I'll be eternally grateful for what he said. And he said to me, well, you're the expert in this and you know your son better than I do. So if you think that's what it is, let's get him checked out.
Brilliant.
And he sent Max, he immediately referred Max to our local hospital, to paediatrics. And we had an appointment there maybe a couple of months later. That was slightly more challenging. We saw a paediatric doctor and I, again, explained all of what was going on. And they obviously took a stool sample and they took blood tests. And by that stage, I was really concerned because my son was incredibly thin. He wasn't eating very much. He was going to the toilet all the time. There was blood. He wasn't very well at all. Yeah. And this doctor said, yeah, it doesn't seem quite right, does it? Well, we'll see him again in 3 months and see how he's doing. And I must admit, I kind of said, I'm not sure he's going to make another 3 months. He's really, really not very well. Well, you'll get an appointment through and we'll see you in 3 months. So, and at that stage, I wasn't the empowered person that I am now. And I wasn't I wasn't quite brave enough to say, well, actually, that's not good enough. I'm going to stay here until you do something different. So I went away with my son thinking, oh, okay, well, hopefully we'll hear from the hospital and things might improve. And then a couple of days afterwards, we had a call from Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge saying, we want you to come on Friday. So this was like 2 days later. We want you to come on Friday. We've given you an emergency appointment. We've seen your son's test results. He needs to come now. So, and again, so grateful that was picked up and that we got to get him seen really, really quickly. So we went to Addenbrooke's Hospital. He went through the usual colonoscopy and endoscopy. And within a couple of weeks, they diagnosed him with Crohn's disease. And my heart broke a little bit, obviously, because immediately I go back to myself and all the things that I went through as a young person with IBD. And imagining, that's like thinking about that, it's pretty tough. It was hard. But imagining your child going through that is like a whole different level of emotion, I suppose. But it was also the trigger that I needed, the catalyst, I suppose, that I needed to do something about my situation, my understanding, an education around what IBD is and how to live with IBD, and how to support a young person with IBD. So it was like such a bizarre kind of moment of like pure fear and sadness and grief, I suppose, but equally a realization that I needed to do something.
So when you say you needed to do something, would you say that was you needed to do something for yourself as well as Max?
Oh, very insightful. Yes, absolutely. Because I couldn't support my son without being able to talk about my own situation, without being able to say, okay, so this is what my symptoms are. This is what happens to me when I'm not feeling very well. If I get sick, I need to take medicine. I couldn't be that hypocritical to tell my son, oh, it's all going to be fine, and you just need to take these medicines, and you've got to have these tests, without having to be at peace with those things myself, I suppose. Equally, I didn't really, because I'd spent so much of my life trying to block out having IBD, trying to pretend it wasn't a thing, I didn't really know that much about it. Like, I knew what it was like to live with it, but if you'd have asked me what caused it, what causes IBD, if you'd have asked me about all the different types of medication that were available, all those things, I wouldn't have been able to answer any of that. I was definitely not an educated patient. And that was like, learning is something I could do. So that was where I started learning.
So it's almost like an epiphany, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. At this point, before we kind of go into a little bit more about Max and then what happened next, at that point in your journey, would you say that your management of it was good, or you?
Yeah, I mean, it was my normal. I had my normal, and I had adapted, and my life fitted around that, and so it was a bit. It wasn't that dissimilar to how it is now. You know, I would flare a few times a year, which I would then sort of manage to get under control. In between, I'd be grumbling, but it was what I knew. It was kind of normal.
Yeah, it was your normal.
Yeah.
Then anybody else like that would say it was far from normal. That's a conversation we have all the time. Yeah. So what happens next?
So Max, it took a little while for Max to get into a good place. He went through the usual rounds of steroids, and then he was put onto immunosuppressant medicines to try and get him well. And they kind of worked a bit, but not enough. And then he'd be back on steroids again. And then when he'd tail off the steroids, the symptoms would come back. So after a few months, the team at Addenbrooke suggested he try a biologic medicine, which he did. And it put him into remission. And actually, it worked really, really well. And he managed a good 5-6 years of being pretty much symptom-free. And he grew normally. He's now like huge, 6 foot tall, and well, certainly a lot bigger than me, and was able to go through school without having to take much time off and that kind of thing. So from that sense, he had quite a smooth journey, I suppose. It probably took about 18 months to get him completely into remission. But after that, it was just a case of taking his meds and everything was fine. And it was kind of that throughout that period that I was doing my learning journey, and I wanted to, I realised that what I had actually was quite valuable. So rather than it being all super negative and like something to ignore, I realised that there were lots of other young people going through what I'd gone through still, like the same kind of problems. Things have moved on, and there was paediatric services are much better than things were when I was younger. There were lots of new medications, but the actual symptoms and the challenges that you face having those symptoms as a young person were still very much the same.
Yeah, I think there's so much moved on, but there's so much still the same. You know, that's the reality that we live in with us. Yeah. So if for anybody watching that doesn't know Jen is the author and illustrator of Me and IBD, which is an absolutely phenomenal book, and we're going to release more of these when the show launches on catherinemccune-foundation.com, so more people can tap into this incredible resource. Tell us about this. Tell us about the moment when you decided, or the journey to get to Me and IBD, because I think it's fascinating. I think, well, the resource is incredible in itself.
Thank you.
You're awfully talented.
Oh, bless you. Please don't give me any more compliments.
No, you are, and it's, you know, it is wonderful, and I hope for the people watching it, they can order a copy. But so tell us a little bit about the journey to get to that.
Okay, I'll try to be concise, but you know, tell me to stop if I'm going into too much detail. So it started off once Max was well. That's when I actually met Seb, who I know you're going to be talking to at some point in the future, and he now happens to be my partner in life as well, which is very exciting. But so Seb also has IBD, and he was doing a project at the time. I didn't know him; I'd never met him before. Inflammatory
bowel disease romance.
I know. It's quite amusing, really. Is
it a movie in there? Is this a Hallmark movie?
You never know. Gosh.
Who would play you guys?
Oh, don't. I'm feeling slightly horrified now, so we'll move on. But so Seb was doing a project where he was working with an IBD charity to create videos which were young people talking about their experiences of living with IBD. And because at that time, Max was really comfortable talking about it. He'd had he was feeling well, and he'd had a really quite a positive sort of experience with his team, his healthcare team. And he was quite up for the idea of being part. So I connected with Seb, and I said, you know, can we be part of it? So he came to my house and he filmed Max talking about his experiences. And I have to say, Max did an incredible job. I was a bit anxious about it, because sometimes Max would come out with all sorts of random things, but he just performed brilliantly. His videos actually are still out there, which sometimes I get to watch and get all emotional about. Anyway, and it was through meeting Seb, who has this, he's got this kind of way of really spotting talent in people or abilities in people, and encouraging them to do something about it rather than just like forgetting about it. Yeah. And we talked about my experience and how I felt, and he said, well, you know, you need to do something with that, really. And we talked about all sorts of things. And I was offering, at that stage, I had begun to offer peer support to young people and their families who were at sort of the beginning of their IBD journey, I suppose. And that was happening. I was doing that quite a lot, and it was taking up quite a lot of my time, but it was super, it felt super valuable. It gave me real purpose. But what I was struggling with was fitting it all in, essentially. So I started to think, is there any way that I can do what I'm doing, but do it for more people? And Seb spotted that I quite enjoyed drawing, and that was something that I had done a lot, but had never really gone anywhere with. Yeah. And he said something like, why don't you create some colouring pages or something for children that are around IBD, and they can just be like photocopied, and lots of children can use them if they want to, and you know, as simple as that. So that was where the idea came from. And I've never been one to, if you can do something huge, never stop at just doing a little thing when it comes to. So
I can relate to that.
Yeah, indeed, you're the perfect example of that. But if I can do a couple of colouring pages, well, that to me, that's not enough, because there's 1,000 things that you would want to be able to learn as a young person with IBD. So it gradually grew and grew and grew and grew. And I ended up creating a colouring journal. And I was fortunate enough, properly fortunate this time, fortunate enough to have a really good relationship with my son's healthcare team at Addenbrooke Hospital. And at some point, Seb let on to them that I was making this colouring journal, and they were really interested. The lead gastro there, Rob, my hero and Max's consultant throughout his time there, was really interested and really supportive, and he got involved in as much as he was my team healthcare professional who would approve, read, and check through everything that I was doing.
Fantastic.
Making sure it was aligning with the care that they give. And it just kind of went from there. I didn't quite believe that it would that anyone would really want to like look at it or to use it, but actually from very early on, as soon as I showed it to young people or to families or to other healthcare professionals, there was this kind of like, oh, well, there's not anything like this out there, and this is what people need, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, I think the many great things about the book for me is that it speaks in layman's terms. So for a parent looking at that, or a kid, they'll get so much out of it. From an educational stance, it's first class, because it doesn't beat about the bush. It's it talks pretty straight, and in a language that everybody can understand.
Yeah,
and in a really complex scenario. So especially if someone's, if a young family's just been, one of the kids has been diagnosed or whatever the case may be, and they've got this resource, it's like, right, they can start to understand it, and it's obviously the kind of interactivity of the colouring and stuff like that as well. Yeah,
there were lots of things that I wanted it to be when I first kind of decided what it was going to be like, and that was, I wanted it to have a voice. I wanted it to sound like it was coming from a person, not just some information. And so that's why it has part of my story in it. And it's like, the voice in there, it talks to the person that's using it. So it reassures the person that's using it. It's kind of like, if you could sort of condense some actual face-to-face peer support down into writing. That's what I was trying to achieve. And I wanted it to be about learning and understanding, but equally I wanted it to be quite fun and quite sort of personalisable, and something that it wouldn't just be, or here's some information that would then get put down on the side and not read again. I wanted it to be something that the young person enjoyed using, felt kind of connected with, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think you've definitely achieved that. I think it's really important that it's personable, and which definitely comes out through it, because people can relate to that. It's not a textbook.
No, indeed.
Because that's the thing that's going to switch people off, especially the young kids that are looking at it, and that you want to engage with it. So it definitely does that. But it's really grown from strength to strength, isn't it?
It's, yeah. I mean, again, the amazing team at Addenbrooke's Hospital agreed to start to test it with their young patients. So we had a period of months where it was given out to young people between certain ages, and then I was able to speak to those young people and gather feedback and to grow the journal from there. And it was such a positive reception that the team that at Addenbrooke say now it's part of standard care. They give it out to all their young patients that it's appropriate to early on in their journey. It's used by a range of other paediatric centres. Through yourselves, it's available to young patients up here. I was going to say up in Scotland. We are in Scotland, so up here. And it's also available to young patients in Ireland too, thanks to the Crohn's and Colitis Ireland charity there. So
brilliant.
It's spreading. It's gradually spreading.
No, and so it should, because it's an absolutely fantastic resource, and congratulations on it.
Thank you.
So it is available. We've put it into all the paediatric centres in Scotland, and we'll continue to do so, because we we think it's a wonderful resource, and the feedback that we're getting from the families is first class.
Thank you. Oh, that's so good to hear.
It's a great resource, to say the very least. So what's your hopes for the future with it then, Jen?
With the journal?
Yeah.
At the moment, it's still all about availability, because I think having seen the impact it can have on a young person on their journey, and their kind of how they feel about themselves and how they feel about their IBD, it still makes me feel sad that it's not something that anyone that wants to can get hold of. I try my best, but it's it's not easy to sometimes to get it out into places. You have to kind of convince people it's something that's worth using, and by that I don't mean patients and families, that they don't need the convincing. It's often hospital teams, or it's
well, it's somebody who holds the purse strings, isn't it?
It's the person who has to pay. So longer term, I would love for it to be available to anyone that needs it or that wants it. I think it's that we're looking at expanding outside of the UK now, having something similar, but in other countries, sort of having a few conversations there. So again, that would be.
So you're going global?
Well,
the answer is yes.
Potentially, yeah. Even now, I really, really struggle with having the confidence to say yes. Even now, I can't quite believe that this is something that people actually want, because I've created it, and you know how I feel about what I do. I will always be surprised that people love it. I think that's just you, but isn't it? Because it's definitely something to celebrate. Because, and where are you going internationally? Can you not say yet? No.
Oh,
no, just having conversations at the moment.
I thought we were going to get an exclusive.
Sorry.
No.
Again, I'm not brave enough to say that. I'll let you know. So
you guys are doing some wonderful volunteering work at Addenbrooke's, and you are doing something pretty special over there. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so again, I will forever sing the praises of the team at Addenbrooke's. The paediatric IBD team at Addenbrooke's are incredible. They the level of care that they give their young patients and families is just amazing. Realising that I want and working with them to create the journal as well. I was working my way in there a little bit, and of course Seb was also working with the team by that stage, because they helped him to create the videos for the project that he was doing, which I'm sure he'll tell you all about. So by working with the team, we soon realised quite how open they are to hear what people who aren't within their team think would be valuable and useful. Yeah. So as patients ourselves, and also parent of a young patient, to be able to offer
it's a very unique insight, haven't you?
It is, but to be able to offer that perspective, but not in an appointment where I'm with my child, because I think again it's very different when you're sat in an appointment and you've got your child there and you're trying to go through those things. You don't think from a more wide perspective about what could work or what the team could do to improve how they offer care to families. But so being able to work with the team for other things, and then to be able to say, well, actually, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about that? They were so receptive to that. So yeah, we kind of took that opportunity to tell them what we thought they needed to do. Probably the most the biggest change that's come about from that is that Seb and I are now expert by experience volunteers, and we working for the team. So it took about 18 months or a year or so to get us in there, because obviously there were lots of processes to go through. We had to sign up as official volunteers for the hospital, and then there had to be some understanding about that we would be doing different things to other volunteers and how that would be managed. But we got there in the end, and so now Seb and I are able to go into clinics and to meet with families and young patients, and to answer questions, give information, share our story, and kind of just offer the kind of peer support that's generally lacking in those environments. And in doing so, really kind of understanding what the needs, or what sort of is missing, I suppose, for families generally.
And tell me this, if you don't mind me jumping in here. What are the common themes? What's missing?
Oh my goodness me. So I think what has been missing, and what we're desperately trying to achieve, is a sense of community.
Yeah.
So we have a huge cohort. There's probably 450 families that are part of the cohort at Addenbrooke Hospital. And all of them going through similar things and similar procedures and similar kind of processes, but almost never having the opportunity to speak to each other or connect in any way. You know, I went through that myself while I was a parent of a young patient there for several years. I would go there and I would be with the team and feel looked after in that moment and feel safe and secure there. But then you walk away and there's no one else and nothing. And that's scary. So realising that quite often in that clinic there would be multiple families who were probably there for the same reason as us. Yeah. We just thought, that's an opportunity. Surely that's an opportunity to catch those families, to somehow create this community, create these opportunities to connect these people. So that's what we've been about. It's about so we have a way that families can join and sort of connect with each other. We have started arranging family days. We have young scientist days. Again, lots of opportunities for people in person to come and meet others, and particularly for young people to see that they're not the only ones. You know, there's other young people who have kind of understand what they're going through. We've also brought in sort of from a slightly more educational perspective, all of our young people, first of all, get colouring journals if they're the right age. We have IBD Mate, which is Seb's project, which is educational. It's like an online platform of educational videos to help young people and families understand all the different aspects of IBD, so they have access to that. We run we call them our expert hangouts, which are kind of like webinars where members of the team will come and talk about specific topics online. And so any families that want to can join and just hear sort of from the team, not in that appointment environment. All sorts of things. We have a research newsletter, so we're trying to kind of, all of our young patients are asked to take part in a research study that they're doing at Addenbrooke Hospital. But there wasn't really any kind of give back from that. So we wanted to do something that meant that young people were beginning to learn about research and understand why what they were contributing to research was actually incredibly valuable. So we have this research newsletter that's all about doing that, and just various projects and crazy ideas that we run at the team, and they always seem to say yes.
To be fair, it sounds as if you're doing so much. So for anybody watching or listening, how do they tap into this?
Well, it's certainly not something that's done anywhere else at the moment. We're kind of like we're trialing it, I suppose, and it's certainly, it's a lot of work at the moment because it's not done before. So there's not any kind of way. There's not really any way to go, okay, that's how it's done, so we just need to do that. We've had to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah, you're creating the framework, aren't you? You're creating the blueprint.
Yeah, but I think if you sort of step back from the actual doing of it, I think it's just about thinking. We looked at what our talents were, what our skills were, I suppose, things that we could do, and how we could then use that. And it's about offering that. So for me, it began with offering peer support, and any family that's gone through sort of down the road a little bit with their journey with IBD has valuable experience. And it might not be that you're someone that wants to speak to people one-to-one, but it might be that you can offer that feedback to healthcare teams, or you can offer that feedback in a different way. So it's about thinking what skills you have, what you can do that could be useful. It's also, I suppose, what could you say, for families who are at a different paediatric centre, I suppose it's about just approaching the team and saying, look, this, is there something that we can do that can bring people together? Could we organise a get together? Could we talk about whether it's possible for to have some kind of support group set up? You just have to be a little bit brave. And it's really, particularly if your young person is quite unwell at the time, it's then quite hard to think apart from that, to think sort of the bigger picture. But if it doesn't take lots of people to do it, it only takes a small number of people, as you can see from Seb and I, to suggest these things and to get them going. Yeah,
but I also think, and it's credit to the guys at Addenbrooke, they have to be receptive to it.
Absolutely,
And I think it's fair to say that the NHS has some big challenges at the moment, and a lot of the teams there are challenged, overworked. I could go on, but it's not the platform. So to actually to have a team that want to put that extra bit in is massively positive. Yeah, because you wouldn't find that everywhere.
No, indeed. And I think the thing is, you're absolutely right. They are all stretched and pushed, and to ask teams to provide what we're doing would be completely impossible. They just wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
But so to be able to say, well, okay, if you're prepared to be willing to give us that opportunity to help, or to be brave enough to take us on, we will do that stuff for you.
Because there's a big trust element, and it's testament to you guys and the quality that you bring to the table, and obviously clearly the respect that they've got for you. It's trust, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they've been amazing.
So there's loads of positives there. What are the challenges that you've found coming through that process?
The things that we've just talked about, actually. When you're doing something that's very new and that's not been done before, it's kind of scary. And
it's exciting.
It's, from our point of view, it's really exciting, but it does take people stepping outside of their comfort zone to be able to go, okay, well, actually, yes, I agree, you're right, but now I'm willing to actually stand behind you and say, give it a go and see what happens. And I think, there's so much fear and anxiety around data protection and like whether information that's given out is accurate and that kind of thing. So it's a big trust.
Yeah, all the data, all the boring stuff.
I know.
But
boring but important.
But we're just going to state here, it's very, very important. But again, congratulations. I've heard a fair amount about it over the past year or so. I think you've been doing it, and it's absolutely brilliant to see that, and it's brilliant that people are getting that benefit, because the one word that just jumps out in what you said there is community. Because as you quite rightly said, when you go to that appointment and you've got 10, 15, 20 minutes if you're really lucky, or really unlucky depending where you're sitting, it's condition. It's like you're in a flare, how are we going to fix that? It's not looking at the person and everything that goes along with that, and life. And those connections that you're creating they're massive.
And I think particularly valuable when it comes to paediatric patients, to young people, because you're not just talking about one person that's there.
Yep.
You're talking about the entire family. Often there will be a mum and a dad or carers or there with their young person, and the focus is on the young person in the appointments, because rightly so, that's what it's all about. Yeah. But nobody says to the parents, are you okay? How are you coping? And that's where we've stepped in, because we can do that. And it's been so impactful. it's not something we celebrate, but we quite often have people in tears in clinic because it's the first time that someone said to them, "Are you okay?" It's quite hard, isn't it? Yep. And when they find out, particularly when they find out that I'm a parent too, and that my young person has been through all of this, it's like a release almost of, oh, so you get it.
That is the exact way of describing it. It's a release. It's relief. It's, oh my God, somebody's going to get what I'm talking about here, because it's so challenging. And everybody in that family is diagnosed with IBD. Yeah. Everybody. So everybody's affected in some way, shape or form. Sometimes, it's something we speak about often, it's like sometimes the kids are just getting on with it. And the poor parents are in bits.
Yep.
And and at the end of the day, if they're not in a good place, then they can't be doing the best job either. So to have that support there is phenomenal.
Yeah, no, you're right. So it's so important, I think, and you're super perceptive in saying that the parents that how the parents handle the situation will have a huge impact on how the young person learns too.
And if we can look at our younger generations that within inflammatory bowel disease, if we can teach them early on how to manage and navigate life as much as we can, then that can only stand them in good stead for life.
Well, this is it. Every young person that comes into paediatric services will eventually be adult patients that are having to look after themselves and be empowered and speak up for themselves. So, why wouldn't you want to catch them early and kind of almost teach them, well, this is how you do it. This is what looking after yourself and living with a long-term chronic condition is about.
Yeah, and equally, this is supporting the parents to support them. It's the old the oxygen mask in the plane thing, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Very, very, very much so. Well, I think you're doing it. Well, I know you're doing a brilliant job there. So congratulations to you and Seb, and and fair play to Addenbrooks.
Honestly, they're
for
amazing.
Absolutely embracing it. It's massively important that you guys sound as if you are creating a really wonderful team there that can for the benefit of the community. So
somebody had to be brave enough to try it first, and it happened to be them.
Well, ballsy. Gutsy even.
Indeed that.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the quick fire. Jen, I know you've been waiting for this. It's your favourite.
No pressure.
Your favourite bit. Have you been studying to see what the questions before were?
I've certainly listened to some other podcasts, but that was because I wanted to listen to the podcast.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, just to go back. So the work that you're doing with Addenbrooks and the wonderful peer support and creating the community and stuff like that, would Jen have got taken on that support when you were going through what you were going through?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Because Jen was hiding away from the world, so that strikes me as quite a challenging one.
Yeah, gosh. Let me think. I think if it had been from very early on, right from the beginning, when I didn't know any different, absolutely. Like if I had have, I've long understood that when I created the colouring journal, I thought it was all about giving something to other young people. Actually, what I was doing was trying to go to heal myself, to be able to produce the thing that I needed back then. And that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what I would have wanted and needed back when I was 10. So had I have had the opportunity to have something like that told me, yes, actually other people have this condition and it's not your fault and it's okay to talk about it and you have nothing to be ashamed about, then yeah, I think it would have been a different journey. Yeah,
and something that you said there kind of strikes a chord with me a little, and the fact that you've created that not only for kids and families today to go through, but you went through it's almost like a self-therapy.
Yep. Yeah. It took me a little while to realise that. I thought I was being incredibly altruistic and like thinking all about others, but it was about going back and giving myself what I needed back then.
I think that's incredible, because it's almost as if you've went back to, I don't know if this is the right phrase, or to build the bridges and heal the wounds of your younger self by producing this little bit of big bit of magic.
Yeah, I know, you're right. I completely agree. I think lots of people might think that's a bit weird and a bit woo-woo, but no, that's exactly what happened.
I think people get that. No, listen, congratulations. So, top 3 tips for living with inflammatory bowel disease.
Oh, right. Okay, top 3 tips. So I would say, first of all, don't make IBD your identity. Like, there'll be times when it feels like it's pretty big in your life, but actually what you aim for is it just to be a small thing in your life that you handle, that if, you know, that you get on with the rest of your life as if you didn't have IBD to the best of your ability, and you kind of just adapt if you need to. But then conversely, I would say, don't be afraid to talk about it, or don't be afraid to make it a thing if you need to. So if things aren't okay, then speak out, ask questions. If you go and see your doctor and they tell you something and you don't understand, don't just go, oh, okay, and walk away and try and Google it later. Ask questions, keep asking until you feel completely comfortable with the answer that you're given. It's something that I'm still learning now.
But I think that's solid advice on all 3 points. But I think, you know, something that you touched on there is really, really important, is navigating those appointments. A lot of people really find that quite challenging, and it's really, really overwhelming.
Yeah,
totally understandable.
Yeah,
but you know, it's you don't want to be leaving with more questions than you went in.
No, and you know. I totally get it, because I used to be utterly intimidated by doctors. They could literally tell me anything and I would just, well, they know better than me. But what you have to remember is that you're actually the expert. Like, you know how you're feeling. Only you know how you're feeling. You know how you're coping with things. And if a doctor says to you, well, that shouldn't be happening, or this will happen, and it's not, like, unless you say something, they're not going to know. You are the expert.
Okay. 3 tips as a parent.
Ooh. Tips as a parent. So I think one of the things I talk to our families a lot about is kind of being guided by your young person. So obviously, as a parent, when your young person is unwell, it can make you really anxious. You don't think about much else. I certainly don't. And if you allow that to become kind of too present in your relationship with your young person, it can actually have quite a negative effect. So it's really tempting to constantly be asking your young person how they are. You know, how were you at school today? Did you have to go to the toilet? Were you able to eat lunch? You know, how's your tummy been? Which, you know, all valid questions. But when you're getting that all the time as a young person, you know, it's not helping you feel like you're trying, you know, normality. You can still be normal. So yeah, it's about understanding, like, balancing when to talk about IBD and when not to, and just be guided by the young person's response, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to your first point, and you know, life experience with IBD as well, is that as a family, don't be defined by it.
Absolutely. You
know, an IBD family, you know, don't let that define you as well as an individual. But
don't be ashamed to admit it, but don't feel like you need to say, well, our whole life is about this, our whole life is about hospital appointments, our whole life is about medications and that kind of thing. I think another tip that came into my mind just now, and it's now completely left. So this is for parents specifically. Don't waste too much energy trying to apportion blame as to why your young person isn't well. So lots of the families I speak to they feel lots of guilt, or they'll ask, what have I done? What have I not done?
Yeah.
Have I fed them wrong? Is it something I've given them to eat that's caused this? Is it a stressful event that I've put them through? There's almost like this need to apportion blame. And it's just such a waste of energy.
I think that's a human instinct in most things, isn't it? You need a reason, you need a person, a thing.
Someone to blame.
Someone to blame.
But it's too easy for that to turn that in on yourself as a parent, because you think, well, it's my job to look after my child and make sure that they're safe from everything.
And if you don't mind me asking, was that a big thing for you when Max was diagnosed?
I think it adds another layer of guilt on top of everything when you know that certainly genetics is a factor in a person developing IBD. So yeah, obviously it's kind of that there were lots of times when I'd go, oh my goodness me, okay, so had I not had IBD, would it ever have have happened for my son?
Yeah.
But again, it's like a pointless question. We don't know the answer to that.
Exactly.
And it's not helping anyone by kind of going over it and over it and over it. So
yeah, but it's good advice, but it's hard not to do, isn't it? And I suppose to a certain extent it's part of the journey.
Yeah.
To kind of, that's one of the hurdles to get over.
Yeah, it's something to process.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Final tip.
Go for it.
For families, for parents, if you get the opportunity and you feel able to connect with other families, speak to other families. If your children don't want to speak to other children, that's completely fine. Then lots don't. Lots are happy just to continue dealing with their situation with their own friends. But I think particularly for parents, it's so, so valuable. I don't think we've really ever had parents who regret having the opportunity to speak to other families.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's something that the foundation's been doing for a number of years, and it's something I've spoken about on this before, and I live by it. To be honest with you, the connection that you see and the magic that you watch, and you'll have seen it with your families, with that shared experience. Yeah. It is an absolute magic, because it's like you can see people change. Just you see the conversation flowing, and then a certain energy happens. So it's like it might be initially a really, really difficult thing to enter into that room or enter into the conversation or whatever it is. But I would 100% say that as an individual, as a family, you will never, ever look back and you'll never regret it.
No, and that I love how you describe watching that process happen. And I think that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing when I'm exhausted and can't quite believe I'm going to fit any more in. That's what keeps me going. But
I'm not saying I believe it, I know it. With a degree of confidence, that magic is unbelievable. And especially when and it will never go away, because sadly there's going to be more and more families coming through the doors that require the same things. And I think that there's almost a beautiful simplicity in it, isn't there? Because it's not rocket science. No. But it's almost more important than anything else to get that connection and that support. Yeah. So well done you. This will go against your nature here. 3 things that really piss you off.
Oh gosh, okay. Can I kind of add in piss you off / frustrate you / upset you?
Yeah.
Can we go there?
Right, go on, you go.
One of my biggest things that make me really, really sad is the vast void between paediatric services and adult services. And the expectation that 16-year-old children, they are children, they're very much still not adults. 16-year-old children are meant to go from one to the other without a huge amount of support. And I know that's not the case for all services. I know that some services have some really great kind of slow transition sort of processes set up. But for a lot, it's a case of you have your last appointment at paediatrics where they look after you and they chase you if you don't have your blood tests, and they make sure, you know, you have appointments regularly, and they kind of, it feels a more holistic care. And then the next appointment will be your first appointment in adult care, where you're just kind of in and out and you're a bit of a number and nobody asks if you're okay kind of feeling.
Yeah.
You can probably sense we've been through that recently with my son, and it's been an interesting experience. We're in a good place now, but it took a few months because there were mistakes and the wrong people were sent to the wrong places, and notes weren't sent through and all sorts of things. So it's been a challenging journey for us, and I'm possibly one of the most well-placed people to be able to handle those situations. So for me, I can't quite imagine how families who don't have access to doctors' advice and support, or who don't know how sort of procedures work within, or how processes work within hospitals, can cope.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. You know, it's a tough's a bit of an understatement to say the least, but it's, you know, it's a difficult waters to navigate. Oh,
it's so difficult, and expectations that our 16-year-old children in adult services will go in appointments on their own and go for procedures. They, you know, as paediatric patients, they have general anaesthetics for their colonoscopies. So they don't know anything about it. The most traumatic part of it is probably taking the bowel prep, you know, for a couple of days beforehand. Yep. And then suddenly they get moved to adult services, and it's straight into having a colonoscopy with a bit of sedation maybe, or some gas and air or something. Like, to not acknowledge that they're still children coping with this just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, and there's so very much so a bit of a gap in levels of maturity as well. You know, because you can one 16-year-old that was the maturity of 26, it would feel sometimes, and then you get, you know, ones that are immature. Let's face it. Yeah. And they're getting into that big bad world, and it's totally.
Next one. We kind of touched on it earlier.
There's more than 3 here, isn't there?
I'm going to restrain myself. We already touched on this one, and this is the kind of the sort of unbalanced nature of coverage of IBD, I suppose, in social media and the press, and that sort of that representation of how of what IBD is, I suppose. And how what an impact that can have on people that don't fit the kind of the more serious or the more severe experience of having IBD. I just wish that there was a bit more balanced representation of what it can be like to have IBD. And I think like that comes home to me every time I speak to new families, and they say, "Well, I follow so and so on social media," or I've been looking. And sort of seeing what IBD is by going to social media, or by going to sort of stories that are out there, and coming and like assuming that their child's going to need surgery straight away, or that there's something, it's going to be really difficult and awful. Yeah. Because that's what they've got to look at out there. So I struggle with that.
And I think you can understand it. And you're right, when we did touch on it earlier, it's like there's a massive population of the IBD community that are heavily affected on a day-to-day basis, but feel that because they don't tick the box that is pretty extreme that you're seeing, you know, portrayed in the press, you know, in social media, and you know, there's that they can't say anything, or they get the guilt, a level of guilt and voicing that they're not in a good place, or the challenges that day-to-day life brings. Yeah. But it can never be underestimated. But I think it's our job as a community with a certain level of platform, and I'm including GUTSY in this, or the foundation, or the stuff that you guys are up to educate and get that out there.
Yeah.
As often as possible, and so that, you know, I think it's important that we empower our own community, but it's important that we educate those out with as well. And I think there's a lot more of it, but I think you're absolutely right. It's almost like, the algorithm likes the extreme, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is quite a big and tricky one, and it does frustrate me. It's the big diet debate. So obviously diet and IBD is something that is talked about constantly kind of outside of appointments. And I think that's part of the problem, because quite often, most healthcare professionals will, they aren't really able to give great advice around diet, other than, the research isn't there to say that anything's better than anything else. So just kind of go with a healthy diet. And if you speak to a dietitian, unless you've got some specific complication that requires a special diet, which is not the majority, it will be the same thing, try and eat a healthy diet and eat plenty of this and plenty of that. And the problem is, because obviously inflammatory bowel disease it's a condition of the gut. So it's so hard not to be able to separate that diet doesn't necessarily play a huge part in your disease. So it's completely understandable that people kind of want answers and want to understand diet, but the information isn't always there.
No.
But then people will turn to people talking about it again on social media and sharing their own personal experiences. And so one of my biggest frustrations is how people share their experiences of how diet might impact or might not impact, or how they think it impacts their inflammatory bowel disease. The kind of, I can't eat dairy or gluten or vegetables. You should avoid those. If you've got IBD, you should avoid those. And I just think it's so dangerous to kind of having that out there is so dangerous for people that are newly coming into IBD, who are looking to think, how can I help my child, or how can I help myself? If I should be avoiding gluten and dairy and I shouldn't eat vegetables because of the fibre. That's really, to cut out all of that is so dangerous. So I get that it's okay to share your personal experience. Say for me, I find if I eat this, then it can make me feel not very well, or it can cause this to happen. But but you need to stop at that. I feel that people need to stop at that and not.
I think I know exactly where you're coming from, and I think it's one of the challenges of the online advocacy and anything, never mind just IBD, is especially in IBD, one shoe doesn't fit all. No. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's the effects are different. Symptoms can be very different. A multitude. So to take one person's what works for one person, that's gospel. Yeah. It's very dangerous. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes the way people are putting it across online can be quite dangerous, because some of these guys are really good. Mm-hmm. They're good storytellers.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to them for that. But how they put that across, some people on the other side of that who are watching that will take that as gospel.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just diet. There's lots of them out there. And we see them all the time. And you look at it and you go, ooh.
Yeah.
But it's something that we spoke about. I think it was myself and Jen Wilson were talking about people are, a lot of the communities, struggling, and they're looking for that bit of hope, and
anything that might make a difference.
Yeah, and it's that magic pill.
Yeah, but it makes me sad, because we spend a lot of our time unpicking these things with our families. They've seen this and they've seen that. So, I've stopped giving my child dairy, and I've stopped giving them, should I be cutting gluten out of their diet? And it's all about that they've read that someone said that that's a really good idea. And again, you think about the impact that could have on a young person, not just on their nutrition, but on how they feel around food, how they feel around their IBD. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, you hear all the time, there's really people that have got really, really tough relationships with food. Mm-hmm. And I think you just need to take a wee step back with anything, whether it's diet or the magic pills that people are putting out there, and say, oh, you know, what works for you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of self-management and self-care, and you know, and that's a process to learn that as well, isn't it? You know, it's only through experience that someone can actually be anywhere near good at it themselves.
Yeah.
Some people will never be, because they choose not to maybe do the work. But no, I agree. You know, diet's a big one. Must be the diet. Must be the diet. Hopes for the future then, Jen?
Again, hopes for the future. I would hope that at some point it's recognised, it's absolutely recognised that whilst medical care and treatments are vital, a vital part of looking after people who have inflammatory bowel disease, that the other stuff is equally as important and becomes part of standard care. So the looking after mental health, the providing community and support, you know, peer support, and that, and the kinds of thing that we're trying to do on a very small scale at the moment. My dream would be that at some point there is recognition that until you have both of those things working alongside each other, it's not going to work for everybody. No, I think you're right. Well, Jen, it was wonderful to have you on GUTSY. It's been such a pleasure.
We eventually got you here. But listen, I love catching up with you. I think the work that you're doing is incredible. I think you're super, super talented. It's a real honour that to have you as a friend, but also that the charity, the Catherine McCune Foundation, gets to work with you, and hope that continues for a long time. So thank you very much for today.
No worries. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've always said to you that when I first met you, it was your energy that like drew me in and made me want to work with you and be part of what you do. And it never fails. Every time I speak to you online or I meet you in person, I just feel that energy and it drives me forward too. You're far too kind. But I think your story on a personal level is super, super inspiring. I think so many people get so much out of it, but the work that you're doing, and you know, we spoke about that silver lining that people are benefiting from, and your journey is incredible. So thanks again. I hope Max is okay. I know he's going through a wee bit of tough time just now, but I'm sure he'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.